Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, Classics/Non-Classics. This is episode number 1683 and Doubleshot number 1577. Now, pretty much with this review, we're discussing the first two of three trades that collect the third volume of this series, and that is Dr. Fate. Now, you're probably thinking, now, when this book was published a few years ago, I bet some people were curious though, wait, this is the third volume for this series? Yes. The original volume was released back in the 1980s. Well, it was a 4-issue miniseries that was done by Jane Lamadius and Keith Giffen. The second volume was an ongoing series that lasted for about 30 issues. There was even this brief series called Fate. And it involved somebody who was a new Dr. Fate but didn't wear the helmet. And the Dr. Fate of that book was in fact a woman. Now, at one point, it was the original Dr. Fate, and then, of course, got replaced with somebody else. Went through several dead people. Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, definitely. The female Dr. Fate who actually, well, had the second, who was basically Dr. Fate for the second volume for the series, was a woman, a couple by the name of Eric and Linda Stratz. Yeah, and the reason why this was is because, well, Kent Nelson, the original Dr. Fate, passed away. So apparently was them first for about the first dozen issues. Then pretty much like, I think the second volume was like 36 issues. Then he had the short-lived Fates series. Yes, Fates. Yeah, Fate. I believe this was like 12 issues, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I believe it was. Yeah, it's one of those series that I don't think a lot of people talk about very much. No, not really. It wasn't that long ago. It was even Book of Fate. Yes. Now, Fate itself basically focused on archaeologists who technically did not become Dr. Fate per se, but he is, like, at the time, he was, well, one of those 90 type of things. Yeah. And, oh yeah, it was a 22 issue volume. But it was one of the things, it was actually technically the first volume was a miniseries. I was right about that. The second volume was an ongoing series. It was 42 issues and had one annual. The third volume was a limited series, 5 issues. I thought this was the third volume. My mistake. This actually is the fourth volume for the series. And this is actually the first two trades. And here's a bit of a surprise for you. The artist of this book was pretty much the same artist for the entire run. Well, with the exception of like issue 8 and the last couple issues. And issue 13. Now, the book itself was written by a legendary DC writer, Paul Levitz. When I heard this, I'm like, wow, interesting. Paul Levitz, the guy behind a lot of the successful stuff related to lead superheroes, writes this book. I was not really a big fan of the artwork, which is done by Sonny Liu. Yeah, that's the thing. I was not really the biggest fan of this book at all. Purely because of the fact that, well, it just, well, wasn't that really good. Now, this Dr. Fate, his name is Khaleed Nusar. And the outfit I showed in the cover, that's actually outfit he wears the entire run. So let me show off the artwork here. The art style looks kind of similar. I was not really the biggest fan of this art style. No, but this is the artwork you have for pretty much most of this whole series. Yes. Now, Khaleed is definitely now it is confirmed by the end of the book, by the end of issue 12, by the way, that he is in fact a great nephew of Kent Nelson, the original Dr. Fate. Yep. That's indeed true. Because his mother, Elizabeth Nusser, is his niece. Yep. And you're thinking, okay, now I should also point out that there was a Dr. Fate in the 2000s. This was Kent V. Nelson. He is a great nephew of the original Kent Nelson, but he doesn't exist in the current continuity. If you're curious though of why he doesn't exist in the current continuity, I don't have the answer to that because they never brought him in. He's one of those characters that how should I put this? He's one of those characters that's still technically missing. And you're thinking, missing? Yes, seriously, he is still missing. Do not know why. He just is. Probably also because they probably don't have any plans for Kent B. Nelson. Also, at one point before Kent B. Nelson took over, Kent B. Nelson was actually Dr. Fate prior to Flashpoint, but who preceded him was actually Hector Hall, who at one point was Sandman and Scarab. He is in fact the son of Hawkman. Yes, Hawkman has a son named Hector, and he at one point was Dr. Fate. His grandson, Daniel Hall, is the current Sandman right now. Not Wesley Dodds, basically the Sandman of Dreams. He took over the Neil Gaiman's Sandman role of Sandman. Now, in the case of Khaleed, he's basically presented with the helmet of Naboo, which of course they presented this in one of these sneak preview one-shots. Also, here's a little fun fact for you about this book. This book was started part of DCU. Yes, this was the initiative started by Dane DiDio that was a big financial failure for DC Comics, and that led to DC Rebirth. This book, shockingly, lasted into Rebirth. No, I'm not kidding about that. So, mostly put, basically, Kessler basically is denying his heritage related to being Dr. Fate. Now, here's the thing. He is, in fact, trained to become a doctor. And he has no interest in archaeology. Nope. And by the way, when he becomes Dr. Fate, that's his attire for this book. Yes. Basically, the amulet appears on his hoodie. Do not know why he does not put on the costume. The traditional Dr. Fate costume. And this is the outfit he wears the whole series. Yep. And basically, in a way, he acts like a traditional superhero. Basically, he doesn't say cats out of trees per se. First thing he does, saves a plane from crashing. And he's also apparently got a girlfriend in the book. Yeah, he's got a girlfriend. Who doesn't appear after this, surprisingly. Yep. And a lot of the time he's denying it, and Naboo basically forced him to put on the helmet. A lot of the time in this book. Mm-hmm. In the case of the first trade, just basically battles a bunch of people. And then we have one point we actually have a flashback of the original Dr. Fate, and I believe this is implied to be Kent Nelson. Though I don't think so. But yeah, Khaleed does not meet his awesome great uncle until the end of issue 12. That's when he finally meets him. Not fights and meets him. Mostly, a lot of the time in this book, he battles jackals. For the first, for the first trade, that's literally what he does, while also exploring a little bit of Naboo's past. I like the whole Egyptian stuff in here, which I'm glad they kept in here. That's one thing I do like about the book is the writing. Paul Levitt does an absolute great job writing, Caesar. Yep, he does a great job writing him, and the trade basically has it where you accepting his fate. That's where the first trade ends. The first trade is called The Blood Price. And the first book contained the first 7 issues of this run. The second volume collected issues 8 through 12. Only about 5 issues, not 7, surprisingly. Yeah, I'm not really sure why this was. And so, by this book, he's basically accepted his fate as Dr. Fate. He basically continues his time as Dr. Fate, the same people, deal with the whole stuff with the Jackal. Not Jackal from DC Marvel Comics, different Jackals. And most of the point, he's trying to have a normal life. Well, he's also trying to save people from disasters. Yeah, basically, he's doing superhero stuff. And he's also checking social media briefly. Yes, a superhero takes social media. That's interesting. Yeah, and a lot of the time in these later issues, he does not take off his helmet. Maybe once. He spends a lot of time wearing the helmet. He wears it way too much. You might be thinking, does wearing this helmet fake his psyche? No, not really per se. And then we get flashback of Roman soldiers. Yeah, Romans. We have an issue called Great Caesar's Ghost where Nestor meets Julius Caesar, who was dictator prior to apparently trying to become emperor of the Roman Empire. He was the last known major leader of the Roman Republic before it was retitled to be the Roman Empire. It's kind of confusing of who the guy who became Caesar Augustus. I've heard some accounts it's his son-in-law. I've heard also other accounts that this was actually his nephew or his adopted son. Yeah, I've never had clear understanding about the guy who took over after him. Yeah, I'm like, an Egyptian takes on Romans. Well, there's kind of basically a connection to this because Julius Caesar has actually been to Egypt. As a matter of fact, according to actual known history, he has actually met the legendary, the beautiful Cleopatra herself. As a matter of fact, how realistic rebuilt the kingdom is actually going to reference this probably in an episode at the end because reference in book 4 when, of course, Julius Caesar met Cleopatra. From what I've read, and this probably is true, when he met her, she was hiding in a rug, and she was butt naked. Yes, seriously. He met the beautiful Cleopatra, and she was butt naked. And by the way, here's the thing about Cleopatra, the last known one. She was of Greek descent. And the Egyptians had this weird thing of where the pharaohs married their sisters. Yes, seriously. So basically you have Cleopatra marrying her brother. I am not kidding about that. It's Egyptians. Yep. So, aside from dealing with that, after basically dealing with Julius Caesar, of course, he had been missing some school, but he's not kicked out despite the fact that he actually missing a lot of school. So, after all these people, finally, at the end of issue 12, he's like, I'm finally glad to meet you, Uncle Kent. Likewise, young namesake. It's cool to meet the legendary Kent Nelson. Thanks. But I think it's something that belongs to me. And there's your first appearance in this book of Kent Nelson, the original Dr. Fate, who appears throughout the later part of this book. Now, I may not be a fan of the artwork, but I love the writing that Paul Levitz does. I mean, the guy himself, on books I have read that he wrote, nothing has technically been bad that he's written. No, not really. My personal favorite book series he's written is Legion of Superheroes, which I love the work he did for that one. If you want to think of basically something behind that per se, aside from Legion, that's a really good question. Basically, another book aside from Legion of Superheroes, why could be like, well, technically also like issue 12 was the first time that he appeared post Flashpoint, Kent B. Nelson. So aside from the Legion superhero stuff, I would probably say, excuse me, that book I really enjoy reading of his All-Star comic run from the 70s. There's that. His JC issues were really good. Cosmic Boy, of course, Lead Superheroes, obviously. There's nothing I never disliked. I mean, he wrote Lead Superheroes for a long time. I mean, last time he wrote them was actually back in 2013 with the last issue of the series. Yep, before Bendis took over. Yep. But these books are really good. I'm going to give both books a 9 out of 10. We'll give them a 9.5, but I'm not really a big fan of the artwork. That's the only thing. And it's shocking, though, that this book lasts as long as it did. My guess, people love the writing by Paul Levitz. If you think about it, he was the only really old, his name was probably bigger than Scott Snyder, Peter DiTomasi, or even Jeff Johns, or even Jeff, basically, you think of any big name in the last several years, Scott Snyder, Peter DiTomasi, James IV, Josh Williamson. Paul Levitz's name is bigger than theirs because he's been active in DC Comics since the 1970s. And I think this may have been his last book he worked on at DC. Yeah. Let me take a look. I think this may have been his last official book he worked on. By the way, he's 65. Thinking, wow, 65. Let's see. His last book he officially worked on was probably this, because there's nothing listed currently that he worked on. I mean, he worked DC since actually, wait, he did do one book after this book wrapped up, and he did Action Comics 80 Years Superman. Here's the weird thing. Oh wait, there was one book he worked on, Visitor, for Valiant. But for DC, was the Action Comics 80 Years of Superman. That was the most recent thing he worked on. But you look at this guy's work. He mostly has worked at DC. He's never worked anywhere place else but DC Comics. Yep. But yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for this particular review. I would do one more Comic Corner, but it's kind of late, so I'm going to save the Comic Corner for tomorrow. Yes. Along with more Yashing Apprentice Half Demon. Okay? Thanks for the video. Bye.